Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at Ask Adam Torres. And if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, so today I have Tony Zorc on the line, and he's CEO over at Accounting Seed and author of the newly released book, Iconoclasm. And Tony, I have a copy of your book over here in the studio, and excited to have you on the show, man. It's great to reconnect with you.
Adam, thanks so much. Excited to be back here talking to you again as well.
Man, so I have to just start off by asking you, like, how are you doing this, man? You're everywhere. I see you on Twitter. I see you all over the place. And the book launch, everything seems to be going amazing. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good and I have a lot of help with this, so that's good. I have a good team assisting me. They're fantastic. It is a lot of work though to one, write the book and then also, promote it and promote your idea and promote your platform is a ton of work as well. But I think that's, I have a passion for this and that's why I'm excited to do it.
So I do have to we will do a deep dive into the book, but I do have to take a little sidebar here. Speaking of how difficult it is to get a book out there, I know there's a lot of people watching that have this book in their head or they have this thing they want to do and something's holding them back. So I have to ask you, like, how'd you get it done? Like, how'd you just finally do it?
Well, I love speaking on different topics, and I've really enjoyed that part of being a CEO, being at my company and telling company stories and just enjoy it. So I decided I wanted to do that more and do it at even other companies because I got a lot of fun stories to share in the 12 years I've been an entrepreneur, and the other 12 years I was working in corporate America, and then I was an athlete and I do a bunch of stuff. And so I was actually at a funeral, and this is funny. I was at Harvard University at this funeral, and I met a guy who was a very successful tech entrepreneur who sold his business to Oracle and does speaking full time and gets paid for it really well, and he's very successful at it. And he said, he said, you need to write a book before you go out speaking, because the book will help you find your voice. It'll give clarity to what you're about. And it's hard to write a book. Here's what you do. You write 500 words a day. Every day you write 500 words. You're going to throw out half of it, but just get up, write 500 words a day, keep going. And he was totally right. And you can do it too, Adam. Anyone can do it. It's just an amount of discipline. For me, it was really hard to get it going. But once I did, I actually wrote the book in about 8 weeks because I just went like crazy on it, right? And it was just that getting started that was really difficult. But that 500 words a day is the key. And I recommend everyone writes a book, Adam, because it gets you so organized and thinking about what you're about. What are you really about? Like, I think about this, but then when I put it down on paper, it's something different.
So let's, speaking of the book, let's just dive right in. So iconoclasm, I know I'll put myself on the spot. Before I read your book, I hadn't heard of it. So I didn't really understand the term or the angle. So maybe we just start there, like iconoclasm. Like where'd you come up with this, and how'd you find this as the idea for the book, I should say?
I'm glad you haven't heard of it, Adam, because I'm taking it from myself. That's part of the kind of nuance of it, right? So I had done some research and trying to find a word that really sums up what I'm about, and couldn't really find one. Found the closest thing I could to it, and then decided to kind of hijack this word and then also create my own term for it. But an iconoclast really is a rugged individual. It's someone who bucks the trend, is not afraid of that. But what I define an iconoclast more specifically is someone who does three things. So they challenge the existing way of doing things, they design a better way to do it, and then they execute on those plans. And that's how I define an iconoclast, and go into what each of those means and what's the difference between that and other kind of traditional roles, all in the book there.
So let's unpack that a little bit. So the idea of challenging, I guess let's start there. So tell us a little bit more about what that means.
Well, Adam, one thing when I stopped and think about it, my father, I lost him in '07, but he was just a guy who really he really raised me to try to think independently, come up with my own ideas. And when I go out when we listen to the airwaves, and there's a cost of putting messages out on our airwaves and digitally, right? So
For sure.
at the high end, there's corporations spending money advertising. On the low end, there's still people doing their effort, putting out their messaging. But
Hmm.
there's a cost, there's an expense to that. And when you think about the effort it takes for people to put this out, they're wanting you to do a certain thing when they do that, right? So corporations are wanting to sell you a product, nonprofits are wanting you to donate towards their movement, politicians are wanting you to vote for them a certain way. There is very little, if not any, or next to none, messaging out there for you to think for yourself.
Yeah.
It just really is, there's no commercial value to it,
Hmm.
right? And I have the same problem with fasting. Like I'm actually on a 5-day fast this week. And if you think about, fasting is really unrepresented in our diet movement because there's no money behind it. It's the absence of something, right? And it's a wonderful thing to do, by the way. But so there's just not enough content out there for people, trying to encourage people to think for yourself, because there's no commercial value to it.
Mm.
So when you think who really benefits from you thinking for yourself, it's just you and maybe your dependents, and maybe in some circumstances your company, but it's a
Yeah.
tiny tiny list. There's not enough stuff out there. That's why I wrote the book. And it's forming this habit of challenging, designing, and executing that frees you of what I call being a drone.
Mm.
Being a drone is really just letting someone else decide for you, letting yourself be ruled by fear. Whereas in taking account different sides of the story,
Hmm.
taking in advice, sifting through what's BS, what's real, and then making a judgment based on what you see, and using those sources as advisors, not to make the decision for you, but to inform you so you can make your own decision, is really what I'm trying to promote in this book and show people how.
And so let's move on to that second part. So designing, like what exactly, how has that played a role?
Yeah. So there's lots of people out there, and Adam, in business, you see this all the time, where first off, people are like, "Oh, I want to be a business person. I want to be an entrepreneur, and I have this dream to do this." And I say that's great. Have you built a plan to break away from your job? Have you figured out how you're gonna go without a paycheck? Have you figured out when you're giving your 2 weeks notice? Oh no, oh no, no. So that first step of, just a lot of people can do that first step of
Hmm.
challenging maybe the prescribed way or the existing way, or things they should be doing something different. But if you don't design an actual plan and execute on it, you're really just being a dreamer, right? And then a
Yeah.
bunch of people do the two steps where they'll think, and like, you know what, I know how to do this better. I'll do this. But then they won't, when it comes, when I call it coming down, time for the showdown. So it's like in the old West, when the cowboys meet up to do the shooting, the duel. It's like, where are you at the time of the
Yeah.
showdown, right? You're nowhere near it. So it's all talk, and it makes it easy. So it's that challenge, but actually designing a plan that you're really going to do
Hmm.
and executing on it, that makes the difference. That's what makes an iconoclast from a dreamer, from just a thinker, those things.
Yeah, and I mean, some people call it jumping off the ledge, jumping off the cliff. Like, when you gonna do that thing? When you gonna go out there? When you gonna chase that dream? Which not saying it's easy. I'm not trying. I'm personally not trying to push anybody off that ledge, because being an entrepreneur, depending on your background, can be painful. Depending
Well,
on your experience and all those other things.
yeah,
So
and Adam, here's what I want to clarify: is that this book is not necessarily a business book.
Mhm.
It's really more of a self-help book. And you do not need to be, I go through the difference and outline what's the difference between an entrepreneur, an iconoclast, an inventor, a
Mhm.
philanthropist, all those things, because they're different things. So I want to be clear, you don't have to be an entrepreneur to be an iconoclast. In fact, I just did a video on my site on how to drink a gallon of water a day, right? So how to think through that as an iconoclast, how to design the requirements, design a plan, execute it, and show the thought pattern. So this could be a mom wanting a better solution for daycare. It could
Mhm.
be someone launching a complex product. It's everywhere in between. It's for someone who wants to form this pattern of thought, and it allows you to really level up.
Mm.
And that's the power in it.
And so the third part of that formula is the execution side of things. So, what does that look like in your formula overall?
Well, I think why I really like this whole challenge, design, execute kind of catchphrase, I would say, is because all the time when you go down to execute it, when at
Mhm.
times, am I going to really do this? Am I going to really do this? Is it real? Then you go back and you're like, okay, that'll never work. I've got to go back to design. Okay,
Yeah.
why am I designing? Okay, I got to go back to the paradigm of this. So these things, in a creative state, you're going to be fluctuating between all three of those things
Mhm.
continuously. But it's the execution that makes it real and ends up driving the other two things, whether you do it or not.
Okay, so I get it. I get the three parts of the formula. When I read it, when I went through the book, I think you did also another really good thought process around how you realized that you were an iconoclast and how you shared your journey. So let's, for our audience, go a little bit further down your personal journey and maybe how you came to find out that you are in fact an iconoclast.
Yeah. So as I was doing the book, I really looked back into my history, and in a lot of just writing a book too is just getting your thoughts organized, right? You have all these
Mhm.
thoughts, but what's really important and how does it really sum up? So I feel like I've had three chapters to my life as far as professional life.
Mhm.
I was an athlete, as a gymnast, I was an accountant, and an entrepreneur. And this formula really I had been using all along throughout all three of those careers. But it really dates back to being a gymnast. So in my teen years, I was a competitive gymnast. I was a nationally ranked gymnast. So there's 6 events in men's artistic gymnastics, what they call it now. It's the floor, the pommel horse, the rings, the vault, the parallel bars, and the horizontal bar. And then the 7th event is the all around.
Mm.
And at one point, I thought, I was pretty good. I would try to go for the Olympics. So I started training for the Olympics, and I got pretty high. I was, placed in the top 100, and
Wow.
even placed 6th in the nation on the rings. And I won the state championship in Illinois on a couple events, but I was not in the top 6. Like the top
Mm.
6 go to the Olympics. So it is so cutthroat, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up kind of transitioning on from that career when I realized it wasn't Olympic material. But what I learned, Adam, in that was this whole challenge, design, execute thing as an athlete. So it's a little bit different. Gymnastics, I think, is a different sport than football or basketball, and some of these other sports where the whole there's a big creative element to it. So
Mhm.
in gymnastics, you create a routine out of about 11 or 12 tricks, and it's all about your creativity and doing things differently. And if you do things, and you can still make up a move, and if you make up a move, you get to name it after yourself. Now these days, it's super hard to make up something new. Like, you are super talented if you can do that. It's just insane. But the whole sport really inspires that. Try to think of a different way to do this, and then I would design a plan to hit that and execute
Mhm.
on it. So if I had to first design this routine and it had 12 moves, and I wanted to nail that in the meet, I had to back up and reverse engineer a plan from there. So every day I had to do these elements, every week this many routines, and so on and so forth. To be able to do that. So I think the sport really helped me craft that formula at a young age. And then I took it into really my professional career with me.
And so let's go further along and into that professional side of things and how that played out.
Yeah. So I started out of college as a certified public accountant. I was a business major, and as I was asking around, I showed an interest in accounting. And when I did that, people are like, you should go into accounting if you like accounting. No one likes accounting. And there's plenty of jobs in that because no one likes to do that stuff. So if you have any interest, go into
To
that.
all of my accountants that are watching this right now, no.
Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I actually think this is interesting because this drives a lot. In fact, it drives all of Wall Street and our financial sector, and knowing how this stuff adds up and is calculated. I'm like, this is pretty interesting, actually, I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did that. I got a job right out of school as a certified public accountant, as an auditor. And then I, realized along the way that I really had more of a passion for the software side of my business and engineering systems, and then got into selling Microsoft mid-market ERP solutions. And then around like 2008, 2009, I had like 6 clients in a row say, can you implement, we're really happy with the ERP implementation you did. Can you integrate this to Salesforce.com? We're using Salesforce for our CRM and our services. And I'm like, at first I'm like, no, I'm like, I don't know anything about this Salesforce thing. And then like another one. And like within 3 months, Adam, I had like 6 customers, ask this. I'm like, what is going on with this Salesforce thing? Like, why is everyone asking about this? I'm like, all right, finally, I'm like, okay, I'll do this. And the other 5 clients that asked. So I went back to them, like, I'm doing this gig. I'll do it for you too. I'm learning as I go, but here it is. So I get into the Salesforce app, and I'm like blown away. I'm like, what? Wait a minute. This is not a CRM app. This is actually a full blown technology development platform. You can do anything you want on this. And it was taking seconds for me to do the things on that platform that would took days in the Microsoft platform.
Wow.
So I'm like, you know what? I'll just write an accounting app on this thing, and then I don't have to integrate to it. This will be insane. And then you get to share the same data that you have with your front office and your mid office, and there's no integration. Plus you have a tool set to mold any process you want on the back to your exact needs. I'm like, this is brilliant. This is what I'm doing. So I did it, which I think, again, when we tie back to that formula, that was, running an accounting app on a CRM platform is pretty outside the paradigm, right? It was for me. And now I think it works so incredibly well and so different that 1,000 customers later, 15,000 users later,
wow,
it's been great, and we're growing and leaps and bounds. And now internationally we opened up an office in the UK and have been growing in the EMEA market and are doing so in Australia as well. So it's just going great. But I think the formula helped me, just challenge that notion of why not just run it all together on one platform? Why can't accounting run on CRM? Who's to say not? So.
No, that's awesome. And I see the pattern of iconoclasm throughout. And when I was going through your journey, and one of the big things that you also write about in the book is really this, the new paradigm we're in, and this new norm, if you will, for context, everybody that's watching this, we're recording this in Q2 of 2021. So still definitely somewhere along the lines in that pandemic, but things have gotten somewhat better than they were previously. So you really address a lot of the issues that are going on, and also talk about like what it looks like post-pandemic, especially for not just entrepreneurism or not just business, but just in general, and this new society that we're in. So what was the real connection there to connecting, post-pandemic and iconoclasm?
Well, I think that if you're truly an iconoclast, you do not fear change. You welcome it. And because change equals opportunity.
Mm.
And I think the pandemic has brought an ocean of
Yeah.
changes, of which I highlight several in my book. But it's not an exhaustive list by any
Mhm.
means. And it's most of what I've seen as an entrepreneur and talking to other entrepreneurs out there. And one of the things I have to my advantage, Adam, is I have a very horizontal application.
Mm.
So it's across my accounting app works across all industries. So I talk to CEOs of all kinds of different sections in the market. That's what I really love about my business too. But I think, so how does this apply to the pandemic and the post economy? I think three major ways, which I get into in detail in the book, but certainly relationships, use of technology, and social norms. Relationships, if anyone, like any CEO thinking, oh, I can't wait for things to get back like they were and I'm in the office again, like, wow, they have another thing coming.
Yeah.
Your employees aren't coming back like you thought they were. The new office is going to be primarily driven around three use cases: onboarding employees, team collaborative projects, and meeting with outsiders. And if you think you're going to have your people in all the time like it was, and they're going to commute, like they're not there. And if you make them, they're going to go work somewhere else. So you better get used to that. That's very different. Now, what the pandemic's revealed on the flip side is this virtual technology, although it works for business relationships and is fine, but however, there being a lot more challenges in management and culture. It's totally inferior and doesn't work for personal relationships and is just trash basically. And we are all waiting for that, to get back to that normal piece. But the business side of this, the virtual side of this, is for real. It's here to stay. It's going to be way more scaled and leveraged. Not that we won't meet in person, but it was a trend anyway. I think the second thing is the use of technology. Whereas I've been, meeting after or seminar and trade show where you're seeing all this exponential. We're going to live in exponential times where they have like the technology curve going straight up, right? And it's like, no, we're not. That's a bunch of crap, because as long as people are buying the technology and not robots,
Mm-hmm.
people have limited capacity to adapt this stuff and change. Our capacity to change is slow. And it was amazing how fast we did change when forced to, with something like the pandemic.
Yeah.
But on our own, we don't. And that, I didn't realize like FaceTime, which I started using heavy in the pandemic, had been out 10 years. Right. Like, it's not even something I ever used. And now I'm using it on everything. Right. And even to, I had a electrician come to my house, and he was in Frederick, Maryland, which is about 45 minutes from here. And we were going back and forth, and he's like, do you have an iPhone? I'm like, yeah. He's like, hey, if you can just FaceTime me and walk around, I can give you a quote over over the internet here. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. I'm like, why haven't we been doing this for 10 years? So I opened up my phone, I walking around. I got an electric vehicle. And I wanted an EV charger, level 2 EV charger, put in my garage. So he's like, okay, walk down, show me the garage, walk down to your fuse box. Okay. I see a couple nuances. Let's go look behind this corridor and then open up that. And the whole thing took about 10 minutes. He's like, no problem. I got this. I'm going to send you a quote in 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, sent me a quote. He came out one time, did the work. We're done. And I'm like, this was so remarkably efficient. And the technology had been around for 10 years. It's just, a mindset, right? It's just a mindset. And that's the thing that this has brought out. We're going to see so much more of an efficient combination of tech, and the social norms around that are broken down. And then I think this has also revealed how personal people take things like their health. There's been so much more angst in our society than we've known around people even doing things like shaking hands and stuff, right? And although I think we'll get back to that, I think we'll be I'm certainly more sensitive to it than I was, prior to this thing.
Yeah, I would have never. Same here. And one of the a couple interesting things that you bring up here is the idea that workplaces might not go back to normal, right? And then our relationships, how we relate to people, how we work in the workplace. I mean, so what do you see as there's a lot of business leaders, not to give away all your book, but a lot of business leaders watching this and tuning in, and they're thinking about, how to grapple with some of these changes and a framework to think about. Now, obviously, first thing I want them to do is I want them to go buy this book. So go buy the book. But what do you think are some things that should be on their mind as we go into this new paradigm?
Well, in any type, a business or employee,
Mhm.
there's, when there was about 10% of our people in our office that wanted to come in all the time, right? Like they didn't
Mhm.
have a situation at home where they could be productive. And I think that's true of like younger employees where they want to come in, they want to meet with folks, or in the city maybe they don't have a large apartment. It's not attractive for them to do that. So
Yeah.
there's just it's going to be keen for business leaders to really understand the motivation and situation deeper behind these employees and understand that they're all different. And I think, it's amazing on these interviews how we're prohibited from asking a lot of personal questions. Yet that will be the thing that drives people to stay or not if it's working with their personal situation.
Mm.
Whereas people with young kids or school age children are loving this flexibility.
Mhm.
And then now, how do you rally people? What is the we started hiring employees all over the country. We're based in Columbia, Maryland. We hired 2 employees in Brooklyn, 2 in Florida, 2 in Russia, 2 in the UK, another one in Ohio. And now, how do you start building a culture
Mhm.
that feels like people belong when you have maybe a local employee coming in once a week or twice a week? You have regional employees coming in once a quarter. You have international employees coming in once a year.
Yeah.
What do you do to start getting that team to gel? I think the job of the manager has just skyrocketed through this. It's just it's made it a lot harder, a lot more
Mhm.
challenging. On the flip side, I think you can, but without these barriers, you can get people really committed to your mission. So knowing your mission and knowing the circumstances of the employees and connecting those people, and then building that camaraderie at a frequency that makes sense through logistics is the new challenge. And has there been a better time, Adam, to be thinking outside the box here and challenging the existing way of doing things. And that's, the book really helps you systemically go through that. Whereas there's so many axioms out there in business, like buy low and sell high, or
Mhm.
find a need in the market and fill it, right? That's how you run a successful business. There's just that's true. And those things are extremely hard to do.
Mhm.
And doing what I'm doing is very hard to do.
Yeah.
And that's why I have an outline to give you practical examples, a thought pattern, how to actually do this.
It's awesome. Well, Tony, first off, like to say it's been great having you on the show today. If somebody is watching this right now and they want to learn more about, of course, the book, so Iconoclasm, want everybody to go pick up a copy of this, or if they want to follow your work overall or learn more even about Accounting Seed, I mean, and all the great work that you're doing there. I know a lot of business owners watch this program. What's the best way for people to follow up?
TonyZorc.com, TonyZorc.com. You find it all there, or iconoclastbook.com will direct you there, but you can get links to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and Books a Million, and order the book. Also, just following me on social media, YouTube, or any of the social media channels. And then also, I'm working on the audiobook right now too. So I'm hoping to have that out in the next 60 days or so. But yeah, it's really easy, and I'd love for you to come check it out. And there's just a lot of materials to help you become an iconoclast and think like an iconoclast.
Fantastic. And if somebody wants to learn about Accounting Seed, how do they do that?
You can go to accountingseed.com, yeah, and check it out.
Perfect. Well, Tony, again, really congrats first off again on the new book. I know it's so hard to put out a book, and you managed to, and it's a great book. So definitely want all my listeners to go check that out. I was also able to find it pretty easy on Amazon. I just typed in Tony Zorc, comes right up, really easy to pick up. So to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. I hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Definitely want you to come back and be a return visitor and listener. And Tony, thanks again for coming on the show, and congrats on the book.
Thank you, Adam. Love to be here all the time. Thanks a lot.